remember when we were kids in school and the teacher said, show your work. Mm-hmm. Are you showing your work, right? It's not, if you go read all those posts on chrislema.com, they're not sales posts. They're not me pitching a product. In fact, I don't pitch a product more than 1 out of every 15 posts. I just don't. It's not there for that. But it is thinking out loud, right? And the more you expose, so when people set up their content marketing plans and they're like, we got to write all these articles about ourselves. You're like, who do you imagine wants to read that? Who do you imagine is Googling or searching or scrolling who says, I want to read that, right? That's not interesting or compelling. We've been to bars and parties and socials. The guy who's talking about himself all the time, that's not a guy that you want to hang out with. But if you're thinking out loud, if you are showing your work, when the right people come and they look at one and then another and then another, they go, what I was really doing was aligning perspectives, and I buy the way this guy thinks. They think the way I think. And so then opportunities get created.
Presented by Zapier, the AI automation company.
Hello and welcome to the Exponential Scale podcast, the show where we talk about how tiny teams with big ambitions are doing more with less, scaling smarter, not harder, and building big businesses with teams that can fit around a dinner table. I'm your host, Ron Schmelzer, and in today's episode, we're talking with Chris Lema, who is a 25-year tech veteran who's built a personal content engine that generates hundreds of thousands of visitors per month, but he's got a lot to say on this topic of small teams punching above your weight. So we're going to get right into it. So hi, Chris. Thank you so much for joining us on Exponential Scale.
It's great to be here.
Yeah. And as we were talking, and I'm like, I got to start recording because like the stuff that's coming out is amazing. And I think that's really the purpose of this podcast is to highlight that there is a lot of stuff going on out there. And the hard part is tapping into these different communities. You know, we don't hear a lot about them because the venture-backed unicorns get a lot of attention. They get a lot of press. Big numbers always get a lot of attention. But honestly, those big numbers swing both ways. It's not just that they're raising a lot of money and having a lot of value. They're also firing a lot of people, letting a lot of people go. Those are the big numbers that aren't so great. And I think, honestly, the momentum, the pendulum is swinging back to the side of small and mighty. And we have all the same tools that are empowering the big guys to do more are empowering the small guys to do more too. So this is going to be fantastic. I'm going to give you just a brief intro to Chris. I'm going to have him jump right in and let's just dig into this because it's just too amazing to hear me blabbering on and on. So if you don't know Chris, he's been fantastic. He's written over 1,500 blog posts, replaced his entire marketing budget with content. And here's the part that most people miss. 75% of that traffic usually sort of hits one traffic and leaves, but the real business comes from the small segment that comes back and converts. So he now creates tools, AI-powered tools, and other tools that help experts package what they know, build authority, and create programs that people pay for without adding headcount. We were getting to some really fantastic examples, so we'll bring them into the story here. So his products include yourvoiceprofile.com, Content Agent, his new book, Story First, all designed to make experts dangerous. And in this episode, we're going to dig into how content can compound into inbound demand. We talk about that a lot. When you're a small team, you need the power of compounding, of momentum. These are the things that if it takes you a lot of effort to get to your first million and it takes you twice as much effort to get to your second million, that's not compounding. That's just a lot of brute force work. So you need the things that compound. We're also going to talk about why Google has become a competitor these days instead of a helper, and how AI is reshaping the game for content-driven business. So enough of me. Hi, Chris. Thank you again for joining us. And yeah, bring us up to speed on what you've been doing and how you've got to this point.
Okay. I will tell you this. Let me start with this bottom line because your intro is powerful. When we hear the stories of large entities doing big things, and I'm not talking about the negative things like we fired 60,000 people last month, but when we talk about the good stuff, when we hear it, and this also happens when we hear people on stage, right? I'm a public speaker. I've been speaking on stages for now 40 years. When you get on stage, even when you're trying to be inspirational, you go and you talk and you say stuff. And there is, because you're often on a stage that's a little higher than the front row, right? And the front row is often a little bit further back than the people on stage. There is a dynamic between the podium and the front row. And that dynamic of space, distance, elevation, all of that ends up causing the front row to potentially not say, oh my gosh, that's amazing. I like doing that. You hear a big company and they do this amazing stuff. Instead of going, oh my gosh, that's great. I would like to do that. There is a real possibility that you just say, I'm not them. When you hear the big company doing big things and using AI and blah, blah, you just go, I'm not them. When you hear a guy on stage and he's like, I did this and I did that, you're like, that's awesome for you. What's clear at the end of this talk is that I'm not you. And so more often than not, we discount ourselves. Right? More often than not, we just write ourselves off and we just go, that's impossible. And so when you're talking about the power of small teams, maybe the most important thing we can do is to make sure people feel like it is possible. And that doesn't happen in one shot. So the overall communication strategy, the overall 1,600 blog posts at chrislema.com, I've been writing for years. And over time, those topics have changed, right? For a while, it was all leadership, and then it switched to all WordPress. And then for almost a decade, it was all WordPress. And then it slowly started changing back to leadership. And now it's turned into, where I focus on AI. And every one of those changes takes time for people and Google and everybody else to understand. But most importantly, it takes multiple shots at trying to equip, empower, encourage someone to believe that I'm not talking from a pedestal that says, I've done it and you can't. It's standing next to them and saying, I think you can pull this off. Just take this next one step, right? And when people believe that it's possible, and man, the tools today are so much more powerful than they were 10, 15 years ago. When they believe it's possible, it opens up. And I started my professional career at Berkeley National Lab, government research lab. I was maybe one of the dumbest people on the lab, because when you go to a government research lab, everybody there is PhDs, right? Everybody there is they are rocket scientists and they are propulsion scientists. My first job was in the Bevatron, which is a particle accelerator. And I couldn't spell particle accelerator right 3 times in a row. And these guys were doing we're splitting atoms. I was not that guy, right? But what you discover is that super, super smart people, like the best ones, they were all casual, wearing shorts and t-shirts, flip-flops. They'd come up and chat with you. They didn't put on the airs, right? They had no insecurity. They weren't in competition. They were just oh yeah, blah, blah. So I started there. And there were many, many teams on that campus, and they were all quite large. And I had a little team of 4 people. And I thought, there's no way I'm going to compete with any of these people, right? When I joined, it was 94. There were 85 webmasters on a 3,000 person campus, right? 85 webmasters.
That was right. Those are the early days too. Of
95. We were the third dot in 94. We were the third dot of the internet, right? And then, it's taking off and all this stuff's going on. There were 85 webmasters on that campus. And my boss comes up to me and goes, hey, has it not dawned on you that your little team could actually you could run an agency and you could do all the web development for the whole lab? And I'm like, nobody knows us. And there's only 4 of us. And we're doing it. Within 2 years, the 85 webmasters were gone. We didn't fire anyone. We just kept doing the work and kept showing, what was possible, and building web apps and building registrations, building all this stuff. And eventually every division and department was like, hey, we don't need our own webmaster. We'll hire Chris's team. And so we ran a multi-million-dollar agency inside a government research lab with 4 people. And that's when it bites you, right? That bug that says small teams can do massive amounts of work if they're smart, if they're willing, if they're experimental, if they have tooling that helps them scale, right? Where they don't have to put manual effort. So I loved your intro simply because I'm like, yes, that is 100% true. You have to believe it's possible. You have to be willing to experiment. And then once you find things that work, you need to lean in and leverage the heck out of everything that you can.
Oh yeah, leverage. That's the whole power of all this. When you're small, you have to apply as much force to one end of that lever to lift the rest. And large teams get in their way much more so than small teams do. So that's a lot of that. We can get into this. There's a whole economic argument too that, not too long ago, like maybe 100 years ago, there were so many small businesses, so many small mom and pop shops, Main Street around the world, actually little merchants, that it actually wasn't seen as to be too too big of a hurdle to just set up, your shingle and do your business. It was seen as traditional, but like now that form of entrepreneurship has been so separated that people feel like nobody feels like they're empowered anymore to start their own business, do their own thing. Maybe it's feeling economically insecure, but it's interesting how I think, people realize that there may be more stability in self-employment and all that sort of stuff. That's a larger economic argument, but feel free to chime in on that. We can get into the more specifics of what you're doing. Yeah.
Well, I no, I think you're absolutely right. What I have done is I have had a full-time job since I graduated college. I have had a full-time job the whole time. I have been, in corporations, small and large startups, corporate enterprises. I've held, titles where I've run 100 people, and I've held titles where I run 5 people. I've had it all. And yet, on the side, chrislema.com has existed, right? I mean, I spun it up in 97. And you bought the domain, and then you're like, I have my own website. It didn't do anything for years, right? And then, 10, 15 years ago, I started writing. Several years out of that period, I wrote every day. And that drove speaking engagements. It drove books. It drove coaching, consulting. And in fact, it drove job opportunities, right? I kept that on the side, right? Because I believe that there is a real value in working out thinking, right? Every idea sounds awesome in your head while it's still bouncing around your head. It's only when you go to actually write it that you develop a skill for taking a messy, sloppy idea and turning it into a clear, coherent argument that is also helpful and equipping and empowering, all those things, right? That's a skill, and it needs to happen over and over and over again, right? To stay sharp. But doing that on the side meant every time I went into a company, I said, by the way, I run this chrislema.com, it's blah, it generates revenue through, at one point it was affiliate revenue. I made money as just writing articles and then putting links where it made sense. I made SaaS money, right? There were people that were like, I'm trying to get to 10K a month. And I'm like, I'm at 20K a month off just writing articles, right? But I was writing the articles for the customer, not for the affiliate revenue. But then when affiliates started going down, I'm like, oh, I'll just do it and highlight that I know what I'm talking about and I can be a coach. And so the content would play out. So I would tell the company I was going, hey, by the way, I have this other website, and this website is for my coaching, my public speaking, sells my books, sells my courses, sells whatever. And they're like, yeah, that's fine, whatever. They didn't care, but I cared that my brand equity was not tied 100% to my employer, right? And that I had the economic freedom that when this guy is not working out great, or it's just okay, but I'm a little bit bored, someone else is reading that content and going, I think we need this guy to join our company. And they're reading several different posts and going, I would like to talk to you about an opportunity. And then it creates a new opportunity to be my new main thing, right? So that idea that small businesses economically should think through how to stay viable in the midst of everything else often comes down to, you remember when we were kids in school and the teacher said, show your work? Mm-hmm. Are you showing your work, right? It's not, if you go read all those posts on chrislema.com, they're not sales posts. They're not me pitching a product. In fact, I don't pitch a product more than 1 out of every 15 posts. I just don't. It's not there for that. But it is thinking out loud, right? And the more you expose, so when people set up their content marketing plans and they're like, we got to write all these articles about ourselves. You're like, who do you imagine wants to read that? Who do you imagine is Googling or searching or scrolling who says, I want to read that, right? That's not interesting or compelling. We've been to bars and parties and socials. The guy who's talking about himself all the time, that's not a guy that you want to hang out with. But if you're thinking out loud, if you are showing your work, when the right people come and they look at one and then another and then another, they go, what I was really doing was aligning perspectives, and I buy the way this guy thinks. They think the way I think. And so then opportunities get created.
Yeah, there's actually 2 interesting things there because they're related but different. Because you're talking about, on the one hand, when you're like posting on chrislema.com, you're sharing yourself. You're sharing your insights, the things you did right, the things you did wrong. What's typically now talked about as building in public, right? Just build in public. But at the same time, you're saying nobody wants to read the stories about like, well, here's me, here's me, my product, my service. But there's clearly a difference between the building in public and the let me just throw my products at you. So obviously some of it comes down to authenticity, but how do you separate those two so that way?
That's great.
Yeah.
That's a great question, because it is definitely not building in public. When people are building in public, and that's why I say show your work, I use other phrases, but when people are building in public, it is often like watching the behind the scenes of someone building their thing. So they are talking about them, their experience, what they're doing, blah, blah, and unless it's really magical and compelling, that's not interesting to me, right? If it's magical and compelling, it's interesting. But often that has to be way after the fact, right? Like you have to become magical and compelling. And then I go back and I go, oh, look, I can read the behind the scenes. That's awesome. But while it's happening, I'm like, if that was interesting, every television show, every television channel would be filled with, here's the behind the scenes. And you're like, nope, not going to do it. So that's why I talk about exploring your thinking, thinking out loud, the process of taking this idea and crystallizing it into something that's useful, helpful, encouraging, all that kind of stuff. Yesterday, I wrote a post that was, I took research that I read, and the research said people could save 40% on their AI costs if they changed how they did what they did in terms of putting the right problem in front of the right kind of model. Mm-hmm. But it was academic research, peer-reviewed journal article. Nobody's going to read that, right? I mean, at least none of the people I know. So I go, okay, this aligns with what I believe. This aligns with what I've been doing. So how do I write this? What kind of framing, what kind of metaphor, so that I can tell the world this, but also point back to, this is a great article if you want the details, but here's what I'm telling you. Here's the main lesson you can take away, which, by the way, doesn't sell any of my products, doesn't sell anything I'm doing. But what it did was, for me, it helped me define the paradigm. Okay, what metaphor am I going to use? Oh, the metaphor I'm going to use is you need a triage agent. And a triage agent, when you go into an ER, the triage agent is not a worse medical professional than a surgeon or better than a surgeon. They're just doing a different thing. What they're doing is going, broken finger, sit to the side, wait for a few hours. Internal bleeding, run right back to the back. And just that, by the way, that triage agent doesn't need to cost the same as a surgeon. So you can spend a little, put this one in, split the focus, process over here, put big problems in front of big models and little problems in front of little models, and you will get a 2% drop in efficacy and a 40% drop in cost. Who wouldn't want that, right? But that's not me working in public. That is me choosing, right, to take this. Hey, I'd written an article months before that was on design time AI and runtime AI. And I was like, yeah, I know what I'm talking about, but I'm not sure I got it tight. Then I read this article and I went, oh, this is what people need to hear. And now I need to come up with a different metaphor. And then I can link back to the other one as well. So I can say, by the way, here's another angle on it. So it's not building in public, but it is thinking out loud. And it is an attempt to equip, encourage, come alongside people as they're on that journey. And what happens is people self-select. Yes, that's a journey I'm on. No, that's not, right? Right now, you likely on this kind of podcast, you don't have the head of IBM Global Services paying attention because he's like, I have a huge staff. Why do I need to worry? But people will self-select and be like, I am a solopreneur or I have a small team. This is the material I'm here for. And so when you understand who your audience is and you focus on the pains and the challenges and the opportunities for that audience, then they will self-select in and start paying attention. And that becomes scalable and powerful.
Yeah, so much. Oh my gosh, I could probably spend hours with you on this. There's so many interesting topics here I'm going to dig into because we do have some things that we want to get through, but so much about what you're talking about, showing your work, even the stuff we're talking about, which is, this model classification, which is becoming a hotter topic now, especially as you're getting less value for your token now. That's been the big conversation about, I write for Forbes as well. One of my big topics is that the all-you-can-eat buffet for AI subscriptions might be coming to an end soon. you got to pay the piper at some point. That's a whole other conversation. But one of the interesting things, while you were talking, I had this strange thought go through my head when you're talking about showing your work. There's been this trend. I am not part of it because I'm not a TikToker. I don't do a lot of Instagram. You could take one look at me and know that I don't do makeup, right? But there's been this trend of get ready with me, kind of. I forget, there's like a term for it. It's like, watch me get ready, where it's it kind of, strangely enough, it's like the video version of the showing your work blogging. And maybe that's why that's hot too, because you're not really learning anything. They're not telling you anything. They're just like, watch me get ready. And like, why do people watch that? And I guess it's because maybe it's the same story, just in a different way.
Yeah. I will never understand. Like, I'm 55. I'll be 56 this year. So I am definitely not the target of those videos. But my kids watch all sorts of stuff that I'm like, why are you right? But often, right, when my daughter was watching all the makeup stuff, all the get ready and whatever, she was just like, I've never thought of that. I've never thought of that. Right. So she is getting exposure to new ideas by watching someone else work out loud. And that's exactly what I hope my audience gets when they come read my stuff, is exposure to new ideas. I will tell you that my article on design time AI versus runtime AI is exactly what you're describing. I use Claude in my subscription to solve a problem, create an algorithm, make something magical happen. Then I literally turn around and tell Claude, assume that we're going to use AI to do this stuff, but we're not going to use you. We're going to use someone so stupid that they can't compete with you, which means we have to change our prompts, not so that they're working for you, but so they're working for Llama 4 Scout with a limited multi-billion-dollar token size. And you go, oh, that's going to be harder. I go, yeah, you made a bunch of assumptions because you're you, but I'm going to use that guy over there. And by the way, I would like to add a resource file where we build a whole bunch of logic, intelligence, whatever. And so by the time we give it to the dumb AI is not doing super complicated work because it has this. And so when you use your voice profile, your audience segments, your platform profile, when you use those products, that's exactly what's happening. I'm not paying through the nose for Claude's API and those tokens. I'm getting it from Cloudflare Workers AI using, models that are included for free because I figured out the difference between when do I use the powerful AI and when do I use the simple AI. But that's a pattern that you have to articulate, explain, and make visible to other people so they go, I never thought about that. They're putting everything, including who was in that movie, into Opus 4.7. And you're like, what are you doing? Right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, this actually brings us to one of the topics I do want to talk about, even more specifically, which is about getting attention. When you write for your audience, one of the things you need to have is that audience, right? And I know we've all noticed that it's becoming more difficult, or it's the ways of getting to that audience and getting interest and getting their attention is becoming different. I don't know if it's harder or not, but it's definitely becoming different. And when we were having a back and forth over email, you mentioned something that really grabbed me, that you mentioned a few years ago, 90% of your traffic came from Google, 5% direct, and another 5% through your socials. But now you just mentioned to me, which I've heard from others as well, is that only 40% of that traffic is coming from Google, 40% is coming from your socials, and then the direct is sort of filling that gap. And you said in many ways, Google has become more of a competitor than a helper. First with some of the zero click, and now with the direct AI answers. And I think I'm guilty of that too. It's like I'll type something into search, and I'm like, I'm not going to go open up 20 tabs and try to digest this gunk and figure out what's real. Not just give it to me, right? So this
I do it too. I do it too. I go to Google, I search for something, it gives me an answer, and I go, that's good for what I was doing. That's good enough, right? But that's good enough means I don't even click, right? And so all of that traffic disappeared, on top of which some of the answers are from the content we're giving it, right? So you're like, wait a minute.
Mm-hmm.
Initially, when they first started the 0-click thing, they would give you an answer, but they would also put a link to where we got it from, right? So the initial stuff, I didn't freak out. My traffic came down a little bit, and where it was coming from, and I was like, okay, it's not the same thing. The SEO people were all over it, right? The people that are smart, they were like, hey, this is a big deal, and this is the future. And I'm like, yeah, I don't really care. My discipline is to write. That's what I do, and if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. And then the AI answers came out, and I'm looking and I'm going, whoa, this is really affected my stuff, right? It used to be that I could just write and that was it. I didn't do anything. I didn't put it on all the socials. I didn't put it anywhere else because I'm like, no, Google will find it, track it, index it, and send people here. And when that stopped working, you're like, okay, I guess I got to write and publish somewhere else. But then you get into all these other complexities, like what you write for LinkedIn to cause them to click a link or whatever is different than what you write for Twitter, which is different than what you write for Facebook, which is different than what you are allowed to write on Reddit, right? So my product, Your Platform Profile, does that. It goes, which socials are you on? And then it asks you questions, and then it generates the strategy, and then it gives you the actual file for your LLM that tells you, here's how, now that you've written this article, how do you promote this article or open up hooks and callbacks and whatever else in these different pieces. But back to the reality is Google's no longer my friend, right? Google's no longer my, oh, let me send you over to Chris Lema for stuff. The only way that people get Chris Lema content from Google now is if they write, like this AI vibe coding space Chris Lema, right? Like, and those are only people that have been several times to the site that they're like, I want to know if Chris Lema has a take on this. And then Google go, here's his takes. And you go, okay, thank you, right? But cold traffic, Google's not solving that problem, right? They've decided, and I think they've said this from the beginning, our goal is to make sure that the person who comes to our website, comes to Google, gets their answer as fast as possible. When that required routing them to a website, that's what they did. When that was able to just be presented on the screen, that's what they did, right? And none of us are mad when we're going to Google. We're not mad to get the answer right there. Like, hey, I'm trying to fix this thing in my plumbing and I have this thing. Is there such a tool that does this? And it goes, here's your answer. You're like, great. I didn't want to go to a website. I didn't want to go to YouTube. I didn't want to watch a video. I just wanted to know what it's called. So when I go to Home Depot, I go, do you have X? Right. And they go, yeah, it's right over here, aisle 13. But it changes how we drive attention. Today, a majority of the traffic that comes, especially to the new stuff, the AI stuff, is from social. And the other thing that the reason I write and the way in which it's powerful is because we'll be in this conversation. Yesterday, I was talking to a $3 billion company, massive company. They are over 250 different companies, and they want to talk about AI, right? And they want to talk about this stuff. Well, they found an article, read the article, came back, read a couple more articles. Okay, this guy is thinking in the right, they're thinking in the way that we're thinking. We would like to get on a call with him and ask more questions. And then I get to say in the call yesterday, well, in today's post, I wrote about a 40% reduction on AI costs with a very simple strategy. And that's all I have to do for them to say, okay, I'm pulling it up. I'm going to the thing. I'm reading, right? 2 or 3 days ago, I was on a 3 days ago, I was on a podcast. Yeah. They asked something and I go, oh, well, in yesterday's post, right, I wrote it, and you're verbally articulating, but what you're articulating is not, let me give you the whole PhD of what's in the article. You're simply saying, I've already written this down. You can go look at this and get into it. And if that's interesting or compelling, we can talk some more. And it often creates the, I want to talk some more, right? So it is a trust bridge. It is a proxy for more time with me, but it allows me to scale because I don't have to explain every single thing and I don't have to give every insight. I can point people to articles. And when I'm coaching, I don't have to explain every framework. I can point them to the scalability of my thinking via my writing allows me to have way more touch points and way more experiences with people than if it was just, we need to talk in order for you to trust that I know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, it's definitely changing the business models for quite a bit. I think when back in the day, like this is like 5 years ago or more, but like back in the day, the way that, Google worked is that they still do. They sell advertising and, but they didn't generate the content, the content came from the websites and the videos. And then basically what they would do is they would sell the advertising, send them to your site, and then share some of that money with you. But then, one of them got they got the light bulb moment went out like, wait a second, what if we can get the ad revenue without having to share that with the content owners? What if we could just munge together content from many different sites, put it together in a summary? And this is coming for YouTube. It's very obvious right now. Most YouTube creators make their money selling video, ads. And the thing is like at some point, Google's going to do the same thing with video. It's like, wait a second. We could sell advertising on video that does not come from human creators, and people are still engaged, and everybody wins. By everybody, they mean not the content creators, right?
We're 10 seconds away from an AI ingesting every idea on a topic, generating compelling scripts for non-talking head videos, sending it to an API to generate an interesting and compelling script into a video, and with all the right beats, publishing said video back on, and then sending traffic to it, all without us.
Yeah, that's right. That's like Notebook LM with an ad model on top of it. That's it.
Yeah, we're there. It's seconds away. And you're like, no, that's not next week. That's not next month. That's not next quarter, next year. That's possible today. It's just a function of who's doing what. And so what you have to figure out, right? Before we started the show, I was telling you about two people that opened my eyes to this, right? Yes. There was a gentleman that I worked with years ago, more than 10 years ago. And all he did was he was a barber for African-American men cutting their hair. And he taught other barbers who cut black men's hair. He taught them all the different ways to do fades and cuts and patterns and whatever else. And he had like 16 DVDs, and he sold that stack of DVDs to barbers. Not a course, not a certification, just literally here's how I do what I do. And he came to me because I know a lot of stuff about online courses. I know a lot of stuff about memberships. And he said, can you help me with this? And I said, sure. And so we were talking it through, and I said, casually, how many customers do you have? How much does this make? And he's like, last year I did 1.2 million. And I go,
wow.
I'm sorry, I'm in the wrong business, right? One guy, and not even one guy who is working every day. It's one guy who sends bundles. Right? I mean, he doesn't even create videos every day. The videos are already built. They're done, right? Every year he might create a couple more and add another DVD to the list. And you're like, that's an infinite amount of scale for single operator businesses. Another guy was doing stuff with wine, and he's like, look, I do this wine event, but you can't get the tickets to the wine event unless you're part of my wine club. And so I make recurring revenue on the wine club. But then the big deal is unless you're there, you can't get to the event. The event is where I sell even more wine. And you're like, how much? Oh, it's just me. But we did over $1 million last year. And you're like, this is crazy. 5 years ago, Brian Clark of Copy Blogger fame invited me to speak on his podcast and his courses. And we were talking about outsized scale and tooling and what was possible. And he had this thing called 7-figure small. And I'm like, what does that mean? He goes, I'm targeting individuals and how they can generate outsized results, millionaire level results off one person. So that's 7-figure small. Now, if it had taken off the way Copy Blogger had, we would all know the name 7-figure small. We don't, because it's not just the idea. It's not just that there's a role model or example. It's not just that technology does or doesn't do what it does. Today, the amount of technology that's available, most of the time when I say to someone, oh, you can do that. My son last year, I'm talking about a year ago, my son did spring break, and he said, I want to be the director of my high school musical, but the school doesn't have rights to pay for the licensing of a musical. And I don't want to do a couple of these. And I said, well, why don't we make our own musical? And he's like, how would we make a musical? I'm like, oh, come here, right? And so we we used AI to generate a script, a full script. We then took each act, generated song lyrics for each one, then went to another AI engine and generated music for each one. And he turned it all in, and the school said yes. And then, at the end of the year, they performed a musical that was, and that was a year ago, right?
Yeah.
And there were people that were singing the songs in the hallways because it was catchy and cool and whatever. And you're like, this is bananas. Most of the time when I'm talking to people, they're just not even aware of what's possible. But in order for seven-figure small to take off, in order for single individuals to be massively dangerous, in order for small teams to have outsized results, you not only need the technology, you not only need the role models, you not only need the right thinking, but it all has to come together in the right way at the right moment so that people feel like it's not too far of a stretch. It's possible for me versus someone else might do it, right? And that's where podcasts like this, it's where hopefully my articles, it's hopefully where what Brian's doing in his newsletters, all of it converges into telling people it's possible. It's like, it's right here. It's not next quarter, not next year. It's right here. Let's get you there.
Yeah. Well, I think that's what a lot of people are looking for. And I think, when we talk to small businesses, small teams that are trying to, get those outsized results, a lot of them are like, they don't need to be billion-dollar companies or even $100 million companies. It's like a $10 million company or a $20 million would be a fantastic success for a lot of them, especially if it's a sustainable. But it's like the know-how of how to do that. People know the technology is there. They know the general thing, but it's that know-how that's difficult. So maybe let's transition a little bit into that, because that's one of the things that you've been looking at quite a bit yourself. That's why you're here on this podcast. I'm so excited to have you. And, one of the things was the shift from WordPress, because, for a while, like a lot of that WordPress community there's like some interesting overlap there. People who built their own blogs and their own sites. I was big on WordPress for like about 20 years myself, two or three companies that just, had a shared host. WordPress was already there. Put it on. Yes, you had to be an admin. You had to wrestle the plugins. You had to deal with the quirks and the performance issues, and then it wasn't all roses, that's for sure. But I think the stat was, and I don't know what the stat is right now, but the stat was like 70% of the web was like WordPress powered. I think now it's closer to 60 or 50, but it's still
it was 70 or 80% of websites using a content management engine were using WordPress. Of all the sites on the planet, it's like, 43, and I think recently it became 42. But there is no question that WordPress ushered in and rode a really long wave of making it easy. And what we were making easy was business owners, site owners could edit their own content. And that was awesome, right? I've been using AI. I wrote AI rule engines, which was forward chaining and backward chaining, which is completely unrelated to machine learning and the stuff we're doing today. But I did that 20 years ago. I mean, one of my first patents was literally on a forward chaining AI recommendation engine. But the world that we're living in today with LLMs and chat interfaces and APIs and that stuff, I've been working with it every day for 3 years, right? 3.5 years. But something magical kind of changed somewhere around November of last year, where I was like, I can define my agents, their internal constitutions, their handoffs. I can define the guardrails. I can define all this stuff. And then I can have it run all night when I go to bed and generate code that is exactly what I want. There's no slop, because I run evaluations against it and I make sure it hits all these criteria. Like something changed. And November, December, January, I didn't almost sleep, right? I was coming to bed at like 4 a.m, and my wife would wake me up in the next morning and be like, what time do you come to bed? And I'm like, I'm telling you, there is something about what's happening right now that is very much like 94, 95, 96 with the web.
It does feel like early internet days.
Early internet days. And when we were doing that stuff at Berkeley Lab, when we were working on early internet stuff, there was a point in time where Yahoo was called, Jerry's list of links, and I could look through all the links of the entire web in a day. And we went to all the sites, right? And then every day it got bigger and more. And then it was Yahoo and Excite and AltaVista and everybody else. And everything changed, right? But it took over everything. And the web has since then taken over all sorts of stuff. And SaaS, which we called applications in a browser, and then it became ASP, application service providers, and then it became SaaS, software as a service. We rode that forever, right? And all of that But you have to remember that what was happening at the time was, in order to have a website, people didn't know HTML. So someone else had to build it. And then when I wanted to change it, I had to call that someone else and say, can you change my website? I want to change my phone number on the website. And that costs time and money. And then WordPress showed up and it was like, well, yeah, you have to spend some money for us to build the site. But once your site is there, you can go edit it yourself. And we've run that for 20 some years. It's been absolutely amazing, right? I got involved with WordPress, started using it in 2005. And I built a new version of a new website in 2025 that was not WordPress for the first time after 20 years. I mean, it's 20 years of using WordPress for everything and going, this is amazing. But at the end of the year, when I went to rebuild chrislema.com, I said, I don't know that I need a CMS, but more importantly, I don't know that I need to edit anything. I built something called an MCP, which is a connectivity tissue, right? A way to connect to a platform that I could do from within an AI engine like Claude. And I would just say, hey, Claude, I want to change this text in the bottom of my footer of my website. You have access to this website. And it would go change it. And then you'd hit refresh and it changed. And you're like, this is bananas. So the other day, last weekend, I wrote an article that was how to build and manage the non-developer's guide to building and managing a website with Claude. And it uses Claude Cowork on your local computer. It even uses GitHub and Cloudflare for pages so that anytime you push something to GitHub, it automatically pushes it to Cloudflare, and that makes it. And one of the tech guys read it and went, I don't know if non-developer can do this. And I go, whoa. First of all, there's 24 screenshots. I mean, every step has a screen, so nobody's freaking out. But I said, I already had 2 friends who were like, what magic is this? They went through all the steps and they were like, signing up for GitHub doesn't mean I know what it is. I just clicked and said, here's my name, and then hit done, and I had it. And then I went over here and I clicked Cloudflare, here's my name and email, click done, I have it. I didn't have to do more than that, right? And you go to Claude and you say, I want to connect to Cloudflare, and it pops open a window, goes, do you accept? Yes, I accept. I want to connect to GitHub. Do you accept? Yes, I accept. And I'm like, these people are changing. A buddy of mine is like, I told my wife I'm a webmaster. Yeah. I'm like, that's awesome, right? Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah, I feel the same way. Like, when I was putting my sites together, I'm like, I think I'm sort of past the WordPress days of like managing a MySQL database and the migration plugins and dealing with security issues. And yeah, we're at this point now where this is like the ultimate vision of the no code movement, where you're literally not coding at all. Yeah. And it's kind of funny how you mentioned,
there are certain sizes of companies that still need, if you worked at Disney, when we built software for Disney, they had 7 different reviewing departments before something went live. Yeah. The technical people had to review how the plugin was written, and the marketing people had to review the copy, and the legal people had to review any promises and what graphics were used. You're not gonna vibe code that website. So WordPress becomes really powerful for that, or any other content management based solution. But there's a ton of people that have a 5 or 6 page website that doesn't change very often, and they don't need to spend $10,000 or $20,000 to build a website when the only thing they're going to change is their phone number or their email every now and then. And you go, well, for that audience, WordPress was overkill to begin with. We didn't have a way for them to no code, not touch their stuff. Even when you look at web flows of the world, the fact that you have these tiny little boxes for padding and spacing, and you're like, how would my buddy Steve know what the difference is between padding and space? Like, that's just never gonna work. Yeah. But now he just goes to Claude and goes, hey, can you move that in a little bit? I mean, I just want a little more breathing room around it, and it does it. And he's like, this is amazing. And you
can say, oh, and by the way, make it responsive, so it works in a mobile browser, and it does. Yeah. Yeah, I think we're definitely in this era. And actually, this conversation's nicely full circle, because we talked about how big companies like Disney have this department and that department, this approval. It's like, again, we get down to, well, small teams can have access to the same tools, maybe even better tools, because large organizations might not even allow them to use it, even though they're all decrying the use of AI for getting rid of their teams. They're still getting in their own way, and they're not even using those tools. It's a crazy argument. Like, okay, then you could nowadays you can move faster than a big organization. You have access to the best tools, the same tools at the same prices too. It's not like you're paying $20,000 a person license for something, right? I mean, we'll get into maybe tokens will become more expensive and may not be. But then again, a lot of us are playing with local models and open source models, and they're getting better and better every day. So let's actually like shift this a little bit, because I want to talk a little bit about how you're getting this leverage. You know, one of your philosophies, especially around experts, is that experts don't need more knowledge, they need more leverage. And so you were talking about how your blog was your first leverage system, and of course AI tools now are the second. So what do you see as this common thread? Like, what do you see as like what are these other things, especially these high performance that you're seeing, that you're working with, they're getting more bang for the buck. They're able to do a little bit of work and get a huge amount of return. There's a lot of things we talk about, but I'm very interested in what you're seeing.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you sent, or if one of your listeners went to yourcontentagent.com, if you go to that is a skill graph. So it's 16 files that you drop into an LLM, and then it helps you write articles or edit articles. It takes your partial idea, turns it into a full-fleshed idea, and then it gives you a human in the loop spot to edit the idea, and then it writes the final one, right? And if you add your voice profile and your audience segments files to that, it leverages those and it becomes even better. But that's not the point. If you go to yourcontentagent.com and you go to how it works, and you're going to read the pipeline, it's a 7-step pipeline, and then you're going to see all the different tournaments and the competition and the frameworks that are being used. And it doesn't give you every single framework. It just shows you that these different things exist. What you're going to see is that I took 96 different frameworks, rules, approaches, strategies, extracted them from me, turn them into files. Then, because ChatGPT doesn't let you put in more than 20 files into a project, combined it into a skill graph of 16 files, right? So it stayed under. And you go, wait, you're selling that? I go, that's not the point. I don't care. If someone uses it, it's great. If they don't like it, they don't like it. If they want to go and start tweaking it and changing it, that's great. They have the rights to do all that. But it is a demonstration of what extracted expertise is. It's the ability to think. The term is metacognition, right? To think about your thinking. And it's how do you step back and go, I know you're doing this, but how are you thinking about it when you're doing it, right? Gary Klein, an incredible guy who created a decision-making framework called Prime. Oh my gosh, I'm going to forget the official name of it, but Gary Klein, Klein, is the guy who did it. And what he did is he went and interviewed fire chief captains who show up on the scene. And if you know anything about fire and fire departments and whatever, is they show up on a scene and they get 60 to 120 seconds to figure out what's going on. And then they huddle and there's a minute of instructions. You go here, you do this, you do that, you do that. And then they all go. And you're like, how are they figuring that out? And what Gary Klein did was, how do I extract expertise from these guys? So he's interviewing them and he's thinking, right? Recognition prime decision model is what his thing was. And he was thinking the fire captain's going to do pro and con. I could do this or I could do this. And that's not how the interview went at all, right? He's interviewing all these different fire captains. And what they're doing instead is they go, oh, I'm looking and I see a billboard. The billboard's on metal. What I know is that metal, even if it's next to a building that's on fire, is going to heat that metal, and then that billboard is going to come down. So instruction number 1, there's a pattern I've seen before. So instruction number 1, get all those people and pull them way back because that thing could come down. Next thing. And you're like, that decision-making is completely different. And what Gary Klein was doing was figuring out how to extract that so that you could articulate it. Then he could go to other fire captains and validate it. There is something incredibly powerful about expertise extraction that every single AI tool out there in the world is going to need. Because if you don't do that, if you say, hey, AI, I want you to code me a to-do app, it's going to go, great, I've been trained on this. I have read all of GitHub. And you're like, oh, wait, time out. You read all of GitHub? Is there a way I could get you to only read the top 10% of GitHub from the top developers? And they're like, nope, I got you. And you're like, so you're an average at best developer. And you're going to bring me every security issue and every problem because you got trained on not only great stuff, but drivel, right? So you go, no, I don't want that. You go, great. Well, then what do you want? Oh, I want it to code the way I would code it. Well, what does that mean, right? So there is this need to extract expertise and then give it to AI so that it can leverage it, put it in play, scale what you're doing because you've extracted that. But that's hard because here's the thing, right? If I were to ask you, hey, Ron, how do you do this? How do you do that? How do you prepare for a podcast interview? You're going to, first of all, you're going to go, well, Chris is not a podcast interviewer. So I can't give him the low level details because he's going to get bored really quick and he's going to hang up. But also you go, he probably just wants big picture stuff. So cognitively, you're going to shift into teacher mode. And then what you're going to do is you're going to give me platitudes. Now, they're going to be truths, right? Everything I've told you on this call has been a truth, but almost none of these truths would be super valuable to an AI engine because they're too high level. There's too many exceptions. So how do we extract? This is the problem I spend my evenings and weekends on, is how do we extract expertise from an expert which doesn't trigger the lecture mode and platitudes mode, but instead gives me the low-level details that allow me to encode that into stuff, right? And I experienced that while building your content agent. I experienced that as I was building all the other tools. Is like, God, we're going to have, so first I built the tools just to make it better for other people and make it easier and all that. But then I realized, oh, we have a problem. All of AI needs expertise extraction. And what Gary Klein did is helpful, but it's not enough. I got to dig in deeper and figure out what's the tooling that allows me to interview an expert and extract something that AI can actually put into practice. So that's the problem space that I'm living in.
Well, that's great. Well, that's a common place. A lot of us are sort of coming to this from different perspectives. We've had some interviews where we talked about this is the idea of SOP, standard operating procedures, and then you give that. And of course, the problem with AI, as you know, is it's not deterministic; it's probabilistic, which means it doesn't always do the same thing twice. And then, of course, a model change happens. And the thing that it was doing perfectly well yesterday, it just can't seem to do anymore. And your instructions are like, for whatever reason, they were fine before, but they're not good now, or they're too much, or they're conflicting. And so there's another all the stuff you're talking about is like right in the midst of where we are. As you're right, it's like where the internet was in the late 1990s. We're all figuring this out. We're figuring this out at the same time.
I tell people all the time, I wrote an article that said, hey, heads up, do not use AI to do what deterministic code should do. So you have to split all the work between where do I want AI to do something and where do I want my code to do something. And if my code sees if this score is greater than this, do this. If this code is lower than this, do this. I don't need AI to do that. In fact, I don't want AI to do that. I don't want probabilistic machinations. I want my code to be my code. But then I go, hey, and sometimes you'll see AI goes, oh, I wrote this keyword parser. So if I see this word, it means this. And I go, no, time out. Now you're writing code like these guys. But if I wanted that kind of code, I could write that code. I don't want that code. I want you to reason on the overall tenor of this article, the overall tenor of this paragraph, to tell me if they are happy or sad or frustrated or engaged. And you go, oh yeah, because my code can't do that, right? So figuring out which problems are problems for LLMs and which problems are just code problems, that's hard because most people are just throwing it all into AI and letting it doing it in the same way they're throwing all into Opus and then paying for it. And you're like, no, to do this right, you're going to have to be able to say, this is an Opus problem and this is a Sonnet problem, or this is a Llama 4 problem. And you have to be able to say, this is deterministic and should be code, and this is non-deterministic and evaluative, and I want AI to be involved, but then I want AI to have its own guardrails. Like, don't fall into, I just looked for a keyword, because you're not giving me what you're good at, right? And that's hard. That's hard to do.
Yeah. Well, I have like dozens of questions. I want to be mindful of your time and our audience's time. We're not going to get on, so I'm going to have to get Chris back. That's for sure. I can get you back in a future episode because there's so much here. And actually, probably if I had you back in a couple months, a lot of these things might be changing. And this conversation a little bit different, which is fantastic. So I've got one general question, then we're going to do our little rapid fires here. And let's talk about the attention problem, because we were kind of hovering around it a little bit. But like how do we get around that problem now? Especially that the great intermediators now are not intermediating as much as they used to. The gatekeepers are gatekeeping a bit too much and not providing as much access. And by the way, as a side note, there was something posted recently about LinkedIn's discovery algorithm and AI systems that are accessing analyzing LinkedIn, and one of the biggest insights is that actually video is not performing very well. There was a while that LinkedIn was trying to push people to short form video. I guess they were trying to TikTokify or whatever LinkedIn, but AI systems can't read video and pay attention to video, and the engagement was apparently not that great. And now they're shifting people back towards long text posts and documents. But then the other insight was that company pages, which people put together, get zero visibility.
Nothing. Useless. Yep.
So now there's like, well, social media is performing differently, search is performing differently.
Yeah.
So how do we deal with this now?
All right. So my answer is in a book I wrote called Story First. What I will tell you is there is a core dynamic to humans and human interest. And that is your facts, is your paradigm, is your opinion wrapped in a story or not? If there's a story, we get interested. If there's not a story, we don't. And every person can evaluate on their own, right? What do you stop scrolling for, and what gets you to stay longer on those videos that you're looking at? When you're scrolling through articles and on LinkedIn, or when you're looking at what causes you to pause and stop? And I think what you discover is it's the story, right? There are stories I already know. I'm a big fan of basketball and the NBA, and here comes an interview with Michael Jordan. I'm like, oh, I know this story. I still watch it. Right? Because I'm like, I just want to see it again. I love it. Right? So I wrote a book called Story First, which is for business leaders. And it's how do you craft the story so that you are educating and supporting and empowering and all that stuff that gets interest and creates something that people will remember for a long time, rather than just selling from stage. In fact, I tell people, don't sell at all. Stop selling. Don't sell in your emails. Don't sell in your LinkedIn. Don't sell on your socials. Don't sell when you're on stage. Just stop selling, because all of us are completely immune to selling. The first hint at a pitch mode, and we're done, right? Mm-hmm. So you have to change to be interesting, compelling, challenging. Learn to tell your story and any other story in a way that people go, ooh, I'm leaning in. I want more. And so that's Story First. It's again is $20. What I find, we did this research years ago, and I'm gonna tighten this up and wrap it up so you can do your quick questions. But we did this research years ago with membership sites, and I was big in the membership space and WordPress and all that stuff. And so we worked with a couple companies that did this research, and we looked at membership websites where people paid zero. And those membership sites, they decided, right? We handful selected that we're going to raise the cost of the membership to $1 a year, $1 a year. And the average across all these different sites was that they lost 30% of their audience, 30%. There's 30% of these people who had no interest in ever giving you even $1. You're like, well, then that's a tax. Why am I supporting 30% of people that don't have any interest? So I build what are called on-ramp products. You can't go on a freeway 65, 75 miles an hour from zero. You have to speed up, and you have to get in with the flow of traffic. And that means you need an on-ramp. And in order to do an on-ramp, you got to build an on-ramp product. I keep that book at $19.99. I keep Your Voice Profile at $19.99. I keep these products because I'm measuring for a muscle. And the muscle is this one right here. And they got to reach for their wallet. And if they don't have the muscle that lets them reach for their wallet at $19 is not going to break their bank, and it's not going to make me rich. But if I can't, the other term I use when I'm not talking about it as an on-ramp product is I call them segmentation products. It segments the audience. It tells me who knows how to reach for their wallet and spend money and who doesn't. And you can build a product ladder from there, but you can only build it from someone who knows how to part with money. So in the game of attention, not all attention is equal. In the game of attention, you want people to have the muscle right here. And so you need to build just a little bit of friction, just a little bit of something that first you need to not pitch, be out of pitch mode, start with story. And once you story, create an approach that allows them to hit a speed bump, right? None of us stop our car at speed bumps, right? You're like, okay, I'm going to go over it. But you need to put just a little bit of friction so you can see who's the goer versus not, and check for the muscle. And then with an on-ramp product or with a segmentation product, determine that, oh, this is the audience that I want their attention, not that audience, that 30% were never going to give me $1 to begin with. That's fine. That's why I don't mind. 75% of the traffic comes to the website, visits once in a whole year and leaves. And I go, that's fine.
They're not for you. They're not for you. Yeah. That's good.
Not a problem.
Well, that's good. Well, we're going to link to those articles in our show notes here. So for those of you that I know we could be talking here for another hour, but Chris has got to go and you got to go. Everybody's got to go. So I won't do that, but we will share those articles and those links in the book and the resources, the website, all that sort of stuff. So you can definitely dig into it more because there's a lot of synergy between what you're saying and our audience. Okay, the rapid fires real quick.
Here we go.
Tools. Everybody wants to know about tools. So what's one AI tool or automation that you absolutely can't run your business without? The one that gives you and your team the 10x leverage every single week.
Claude.
There you go. Just Claude Code, Claude Co-work, the whole thing, all of it.
All of it. I use every face that it has all the time, every day, multiple times a day.
Can I ask what plan you're on and what your token?
I'm on the $200 subscription.
Okay, that's
and I'm telling you, like it will tell you, oh, Chris, you came to us from ChatGPT because you asked these questions, 2.5 years ago, and you started by doing 10 sessions a month, and then very quickly you went to 50 sessions a month, and then you're like now 200 sessions a month, and you're like, yeah, I'm whether it's Claude Code, Co-work, or Claude.ai,
max it
all
out
day, every day.
There you go. Okay, processes. Now let's talk about ways of working. So what's one system or process that you think every lean leverage first team should have in place by the time they hit that first $1 million in revenue that separates those scalers from the grinders, the ones that are just going to continue to work hard even if they've made it. So what would you maybe tell them to stop doing or something you think that they should start doing today?
They need to create content. They need to create content like their life depends on it. It's not going to give you rapid results 2 days after you publish. It is going to give you all this. We talk about compounding benefit, but you need to be able to do it and not spend 2 days for an article. You need to not be able, you can't spend 8 hours on an article. And so all the tools that I've built, right, and including that content agent, all of those are designed to help you generate content faster while keeping your authenticity, your voice, writing to your audience, and internalizing your takes in that content. But content is it. You got to do it.
I'm going to check it out myself. And then final tip. So if you can give one piece of advice to the founder who's running that dinner table sized team right now who wants to scale, maybe what would you share?
Stop listening to the people who say you can't do it. Find 2 or 3 people who know you, believe in you, know something about the tools, and are willing to come alongside of the journey, even if it's just a once a month call to be like, tell me what you're trying now. Tell me what you're doing now. I sit in that role for, 20, 30 people. And the goal is simply to say, yeah, that's good. Try that. Like, let's go. The encouragement is what's out there because the rest of the world is filled with, people that are taking easy pot shots, right? And telling you that you can't do it. A lot of times the only difference between someone having success and someone not is believing that it's even possible. And so bring some of those people in your circle and get rid of the people that are constantly going, yeah, but that's not going to work. That's not going to work. I don't need anyone for that. So get rid of those guys.
I'm with you on that. Well, this has been fantastic. That's why we have you on this podcast, because you can hear, yes, you can do it. So for those of you that are interested, first of all, Chris, I want to thank you so much for joining us on the Exponential Scale podcast. To give you that final word there.
Thank you.
Yeah, and
it's been awesome.
It's been definitely awesome. So if you're looking to find Chris, you can go to his website, Chris Lema. That's ChrisLema.com. You can learn more about Your Voice Profile, his $19.99 on-ramp product. You just heard about it. Go from 0 to 65 before you hit that highway. Definitely check out the Story First book, also $20 on Amazon or wherever else. And he's on Twitter at Chris Lema. He's on YouTube at Mr. Chris Lema. And I will give you all that final mantra. So here's your mantra for the week. Create interest. Create the story. Don't sell. Communicate and stay aware of how this whole ecosystem is changing, and find that buddy friend who's going to help convince you to keep on going. So if you've loved this interview with Chris Lema, I want you to hit that subscribe button, leave a review, and share with that founder friend who's still chasing traffic when they should be building for the people who already care. So I want you to think big, stay lean, and scale smarter. Micro teams aren't the future, they're the now. If this episode got you fired up, hit that subscribe button, share it with your crew, and join the movement over at scalebrate.com. That's SCALEBRATE.com. Till next time, think big, stay lean, and scale smarter. Because you're not a tiny team, you're a micro team with mega potential. So get exponential, and thanks for tuning in to the Exponential Scale Podcast.